The International Association for Near-Death Studies presents NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Witting.
Do NDEs intensify the sense of longing that most people feel in their lives? Welcome to NDE Radio, brought to you by IANDS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. I'm your host, Lee Witting. Our guest today, Martina Straub, is an experiencer who worked at IANDS for 4 years before moving to Florida. We had a brief chat at the IANDS convention in Orlando, and she was feeling the same frustration as I was, seeing so many friends and having so little time to talk with each of them. After that, Martina emailed me with the following suggestion for my vital signs column. She wrote, "I can't remember if you've ever done a column on longing, but might I suggest it? This was triggered by seeing so many of my beloveds at the conference and yet having such teeny tiny windows with each." She also sent a wonderful poem by David White titled Self-Portrait. Martina, welcome to NDE Radio.
Hi, thank you, Lee.
Good to have you on the show. Martina, perhaps we could begin by your reading Mr. White's poem.
Okay, I'll be happy to do that. David White is a poet who is originally from Scotland, but who lives in the northwestern part of the United States. And this is one of his older poems titled Self-Portrait. "It doesn't interest me if there is one God or many gods. I want to know if you belong or feel abandoned, if you know despair or can see it in others. I want to know if you are prepared to live in the world with its harsh need to change you, if you can look back with firm eyes saying, 'This is where I stand.' I want to know if you know how to melt into that fierce heat of living, falling toward the center of your longing. I want to know if you are willing to live day by day with the consequence of love and the bitter, unwanted passion of your sure defeat. I have heard in that fierce embrace, even the gods speak of God."
Yeah, such a great poem.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd mentioned in your email some other poets who probably would agree, like Mary Oliver and John O'Donohue, and many religious poems as well. And of course, I think of Leonard Cohen's music and the longing combination of spiritual and sexual longing that's intertwined in his music.
Yes. Well, if we look at life as if all of it is spirit manifesting, then longing can manifest anywhere.
Well, that's true. And then you wrote, "But I honestly feel that longing is the lead string in our life." So clearly you have, I think you're absolutely right. I think that is one of the main driving forces in lives. And I was going to ask you as sort of a first question, do you suppose that your NDEs or anyone's NDE intensifies that longing in people's, that everybody feels, but does it make it stronger in an experiencer's life?
Well, I think there's some plan here. Perhaps we could call it a divine plan. And I think that experiences like that, as well as things like meditation and other things, bring that more to the forefront. They allow you to experience it in a visceral way so that you wake up to it. I think we all have it. It's like a chip that we're born with. And the fact that it gets triggered in some way to wake up and to cause us to follow a lead, definitely. I mean, in some ways, if you looked at our life just on the surface of it, whatever gets accomplished without desire, the desire for some outcome or the desire for some result, the desire for some experience or some participation in something, it's sort of like desire drives everything. And desire is a sort of a manifestation of longing, it seems to me.
But desire can drive us down a lot of false paths.
It absolutely can. Yes, it
or
can.
paths that dead end. And and we find that didn't do it. That
Right,
wasn't the answer.
right.
That
But
wasn't what I was really longing for.
Right. But I think the ultimate longing is, it's going to self-correct. You're eventually going to get there. And it's possible, too, to learn from your mistakes. You can have some experience and say, oh, this wasn't really what I was looking for. And then you self-correct and you look someplace else. Now, there's not a lot in our culture that leads people to a spiritual angle on it because it's, religion is sort of falling by the wayside in a general way right now. And aside from poetry or some other things that people would have needed to have been exposed to at some point in their life, most of the things that are there for the taking that seem desirable are, sex, lies, and videotapes, or
right.
shall we say,
Exactly.
alcohol, drugs, different things that block your perception of your own deepest longing, which is to know yourself in an intimate way and to be able to say, who am I? I mean, that's just a great start. I had a man come to me to learn meditation one time, and he said, oh, I don't want to come to all the days that you're teaching. I don't have time. He said, just give me a tip. And I said, all right, I'll give you a tip. Whenever you're confused or you ever are just sitting quietly, just have the question in your mind, who am I? And he said, oh, I can do that. and that's a good place to start,
It is. It's not as easy as he may think it sounded, but...
No, but he wasn't willing to take 8 hours over a 4-day period to learn something else.
This might be a good point at which you could tell our listeners about your experiences.
You mean my near-death experiences or
yes.
my sort
yes.
of life experiences?
No, near-death experience.
The near-death experience that is most memorable to me and sort of seemed to really give me the crux of what we think of as a near-death experience was when I was 19 and I was in an automobile accident, and my best friend in college was killed in the accident. I did not know that she was dying, but I left my body wherever I was in the hospital and found myself in the room when her parents were being told that she was not going to survive. And I was confused because I didn't even know what had happened to her. I didn't know what had happened to me. But I did, I had that out-of-body experience. And then, of course, in that space, you're not concerned with it. You go to the next experience. And I remember thinking, oh, I must be dead because I'm not in my body. How could I be up on the ceiling in this other room? And so I thought, oh, well, who are the dead people I would like to see? And I thought of my grandfather and some other people who were beloved to me and who had died in the last couple of years. And he wasn't there. And that was sort of confusing to me. But in any case, I knew I wanted to stay in that place because it was a very peaceful place. There wasn't any pain. There was a lot of light, and I could really feel, enshrouded by that unconditional love that everybody talks about. And so the voice came to me and said, it's not your time, and you have to go back. And I said, but I don't want to go back. And the voice said, but it's not your time, and you need to go back. And I said, you don't seem to understand. I'm not going back. That's probably my stubborn Germanic side. But, of course, needless to say, when you confront the divine with something like that, boom, you're back in your body. And that's what happened. And many years later, when I was talking about the situation with PMH Atwater, she said that she thought I probably had a near-death experience when I was younger, and I did swim a lot. We had a pool behind our house, and we went up to the lake with our cousins, and frequently there were 11 kids in the lake and no parents anywhere in sight, So certainly I could have had an experience in one of those places. But then subsequent to that, I had 2 near-death experiences under anesthesia when I was giving birth, and those were a little bit more terrifying because I definitely didn't want to die. And I felt myself going, and of course when you're anesthetized, you can't sign or do anything, talk to the anesthesiologist, but I felt myself trying to get out of there. And at one point in one of the experiences, I heard the voice of someone near my head say, we're losing her. And I thought, well, this is not good, but I guess because he was watching the monitors, he was able to pull me out. And so, I came back. So that was 4, if you count the supposed near drowning as a child. And then that helped me to see, I think, that there are other experiences than the ones that we see with our eyes open. There's definitely a parallel invisible world happening. And that made me want to study philosophy in college, which I did. I majored in philosophy and history, which are sort of things that belong together anyway, I think. But the whole time I was reading philosophy for my major, I would say, oh, they sort of have it. Oh, they really have it at this place. Oh, no, they don't have it at all. And I would move on from the philosophers that I thought were really off base. But then in my senior year, I learned transcendental meditation, and when I was actually in my first meditation, I realized that that was the thing I had been looking for all throughout my study of philosophy. It was an experience. It wasn't an intellectual understanding.
How did you feel about Plato and the shadows on the wall of the cave being, an imitation of reality rather than reality itself?
Well, I had many arguments, as you might imagine, at a Catholic college about whether it was Plato or Aristotle who was correct. And I always sided with Plato.
I think having had a near-death experience, you would have to.
Yeah. That happened right at the beginning of my freshman year at college, so it set me up,
Do you think if you'd had just the car accident NDE and not the 2 frightening ones because you were giving birth, you had to be there for your children, would that have intensified your longing because you didn't want to come back and they forced you to come back? And I would think that would drive a strong longing for being on the other side.
Well, it did. It never did anything like make me contemplate suicide, really. I mean, I was not that kind of trying to get over there. But I did have many years. I think PMH says something about it taking 7 years to integrate the experience. And, of course, because my girlfriend was an only child and I was one of 6, I had a lot of survivor's guilt from the accident, and really had to work with that. Plus the fact that I just stayed very connected with death. I had been since I was a child of, having premonitions of people's deaths and knowing when someone was going to die. And so I felt that connection, and I never felt like I needed to get rid of it. It felt like it was something that would probably be useful to me in my life, and I think it has been, because when you realize that death is actually an outcome for everybody, it makes your life more precious, the time that you do have. And now one of my avocations is to work with hospice, and it's so frequent that people say, oh, how can you do that? But actually some of the most beautiful experiences that people have are when they're transitioning, when their fear isn't there, when they actually are accepting of the situation and they are okay with it and they become sort of resplendent. All their wrinkles go away. They're in a kind of very surrendered place, which is they're clearly being taken care of by something more than morphine or bedpans or anything else like that,
Exactly. There's so many visions that come out of the hospice experience, visions and premonitions and stories that the hospice worker gets that then they can turn around and use to comfort other people.
Right.
The work I do as a chaplain in the hospital is the same thing. You know, palliative care patients, or people who've coded and have seen something on the other side, provide such amazingly reassuring stories that can be offered up to people who are afraid of death.
Well, and you also learn to understand the language that the dying use, because many times their caregivers, either family members or even in nursing homes, some nurses don't understand when the person keeps saying, I want to go home. They don't mean they want to go to their house. They mean they want to go home.
Right.
You know, or if they say that somebody visited me, my husband who just passed away was here, or my grandfather was here, or whatever, and they say, oh, nobody was here. You haven't had any visitors. Well, hello. They were here.
Yes.
They just weren't in the visible condition that you might see with your eyes. But the person definitely saw them and definitely received messages from them and definitely knows that everything's going to be okay. So, yeah, they're not going crazy. They're not, off their rocker. They're having legitimate experiences that are going to help them to pass with more peace.
One of the jobs I had as in Orlando was moderating a panel discussion of 3 people talking about NDEs, and one of them, Peter Panagore, who has written a good book on this, and he's been on the show a couple of times as well, but I had never, in talking to him, never realized how strongly he felt this longing to be back on the other side until that panel discussion. And it was, it was a good experience he had, but it was, in a way, it was dark too, because of a feeling that you were in a place where you didn't really want to be, and that you knew exactly where you wanted to be, and it wasn't, you couldn't be there yet. It's, it was powerful.
It is. I mean, definitely there is that sense, but I think you end up adjusting to living with one foot in each world and knowing that you will be there eventually, and that in that you feel a safety, that it's not a scary place. There's no fear of death after an NDE, usually. I mean, sometimes after a frightening one there is, but there's no... it can be frustrating to have to live through the linear time that your time on Earth involves. But I think it does help you to eventually know that you're going to be okay. And, it's sort of like the poem says, I want to know if you can melt into that fierce heat of living while still falling toward the center of your longing. And if you're willing to live day by day with the consequence of love and the bitter, unwanted passion of your sure defeat is death. But the consequence of love is unconditional love. And if you're constantly in that state of unconditional love, then you are living the other side, because the other side only has that. And I think that's also, surprisingly enough, the place where we made our decision to come to this world. We came into this world surrounded by unconditional love, and in that unconditional love, we felt powerful. We felt like, I can take on anything, throw me to the wolves. I can do it, because we felt the support of everyone who loved us, and those people still do love us, even in their 3D version. They may have other agendas, and it may not feel like unconditional love, but it still is, And
what do you
so
suppose the relationship is of longing to hope? Do you see a difference there?
Well, hope is something time-bound, I think. It's like hoping for a future or hoping for an event to occur or something like that, but unconditional love is actually the state of being that we all are living in. We don't necessarily feel it because it's not aimed at an object. Usually you feel that kind of thing when it's moving. It's moving towards a lover, or it's moving towards a child, or it's moving towards a pet, or it's moving towards some goal that you want to achieve. Go to the Olympics. But
I hear your pet in the background, by the way. Molly is barking. I can tell.
There's 2 doors closed between me and her. I don't know what that's about.
Well, she's longing to be with you, clearly.
Yeah, clearly.
There's a really wonderful radio show on called On Being that's on National Public Radio, and the guest this past Sunday read a poem by Rainier Maria Rilke, and I copied it off because I thought it fits somehow, and just with what you were saying. Let me read that. I live my life in widening circles that reach out across the world. I may not complete this last one, but I give myself to it. I circle around God, around the primordial tower. I've been circling for thousands of years, and I still don't know, am I a falcon, a storm, or a great song?
It's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, it's from Rilke's Book of Hours.
Yeah.
And that implies, the circling implies or conveys a sense of longing as well, that you're trying to hone in on the object of your desire.
Well, you can't, though. You have to just be the desire, because if you try to hone in on it, you're going to make it smaller than what it really is. It's the truth of our being. We are longing. We are that divine longing. And if you try to make it into a relationship or into a goal of any kind, it's never going to be fulfilling, because it's not the whole, it's just a piece of it. And I love that poem of his, because in the widening circles, he's taking in more and more. He's okay with being a falcon, and with being a storm, and with maybe not finishing the circle that he's in now. And I think that's really part of what we're here to do, is to realize that we're not just humans. We're everything. We're birds. We're cows. We have all of that inside of us. It's a one consciousness operation going on here. And there's different shapes for different jobs. And if your job is to be an IT person, you're going to be born in a body. And if your job is to be a house guardian, you're going to be a dog, And it's just the way it is, the whole system. I tell my hospice patients, you can't fall out of this system. You are absolutely safe. There's nowhere else for you to go. You are completely enclosed by this system. It's just a system of unconditional love. And, that's like a deathbed thing that I say to them, because some of them are just, in fetal position and really can't take nourishment or anything, but they don't want to let go. They're so afraid. They don't know where they're going. And I just tell them, you're safe in this universe. You're absolutely safe, because that's how evolution is. It takes care of everything.
You mentioned that we're born with a chip. Do you think we have a hand in programming that chip? And if so, why don't we include on that chip a greater understanding of death?
Oh, there wouldn't be any fun in the game if we knew the end of it. We can't know the outcome. Although they do say that the rishis and the wise people know the moment of their death. I think it wouldn't be a fun game. It would be like cheating at Monopoly. It wouldn't be fair. And so in order to make it even across the board, nobody gets to know. But it's a very, I think we do on some level, but it's an invisible level that we don't really get to access until we probably get closer to it, because we are able to pick like our family and our place of birth and our, whatever. We also do choose prior to coming in, according to the Vedic tradition, we choose the time and place of our death as well. But the time and place of our death is a little bit variable because we have about 5 possible exits, and if we haven't taken the first 4, we take the last one, whether we want to or not. Mm-hmm. But it's just one of those things where there still have to be choices that you can make. I mean, to me, free will, really free will, the kind of willingness that will keep you free, is to always be choosing for the divine, always, and the highest good, always. But if you choose something else, you go on a detour. And so maybe you have to do something else to get back to that place where you said you wanted to be, before you were born, that you wanted to die. I want to evolve this far, or I'm going to, I see that I have enough help to grow this much in this lifetime. And so you want to do that, and you don't want to check out early.
You mentioned family, and with your own family, you've told me as a child you were taken by your parents who were doing Catholic missionary work in Mexico. Was that? How do you see that as a longing on their part? And did you, when your chip was being written, did you program yourself to be there for a specific reason?
Well, I suspect I probably did. I don't know that all of those reasons are necessarily the same, and I don't think they were probably the same for my siblings. Why did we go there? Now we find out that almost half the population in the United States speaks Spanish, so it comes in pretty handy. But
yes.
but honestly, it was a huge breakthrough in consciousness to be able to learn another language, think the way people who speak that language think, and be able to meet another culture. I mean, it made travel to India, for example, for me extremely easy, because India has the same beautiful, colorful outfits and the same ladies with long black braids and the same fruits and vegetables. And, to me, going to India was like coming home. A lot of people, when they go to India, are just horrified at the poverty and the fact that there's no sidewalks and no streets and do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So a lot of it depends on the experiences that you've already had. So I was set up to love India. And whether I specifically set up going to Mexico, probably, or maybe I just agreed to be a participant in the plan that my parents had set out for themselves, which they couldn't even see over the hill to see what's coming. But, my mom was very spiritually oriented. She wanted to give us a very spiritual, formative life. She didn't make us totally Bible-pounding, types of people, but she showed us in ways that were things that children could understand. Like we would have, during Advent, she would cut salt boxes in half, long ways, and that was our little cradle for baby Jesus. So every day, at the end of the day, during Advent, she would give us a few pieces of straw to make our cradle soft for him. And so that was how we went through Advent. And then on Christmas Eve, we got a little plastic baby Jesus for our salt box. And of course, some of us had made little fabric sheets or little crocheted blankets for him or something. One of my brothers didn't have very many pieces of straw, so we had to combine ours for him. But
Martina, I'm afraid we're just about out of time for today.
Oh, okay.
I want to thank you so much for being on, for suggesting the theme of this show, and then coming on and fulfilling it. So thanks.
Well, you're welcome.
All right. And this has been a really interesting and it's such an all-pervasive emotion, the longing in our lives.
It is.
If folks would like to listen to this show again or any of our past shows on NDE Radio, just go to the website at nderadio.org and click on the Past Shows button. And for more information about IANDS, check out that website at IANDS.org. And join us again next Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern, for more NDE Radio. This is Lee Witting saying thanks for listening.